Well, here I am. I'm gonna go for a drive. These are the foothills of the Sandia Mountains, and as you can see, we do have fancy homes being built along the foothills of the Sandia Mountains. It is kind of strange, this particular walk right here, because you have these boulders and cactus, and on the other side of this fence here, as we come up on this rise past this massive boulder, what do we have? Yes, somebody's monstrosity of a modernist home, southwestern modernist. But that's not why I called you here today. We're talking about typewriters, and what I was saying is that there are no perfect manual typewriters. Anybody who's a collector of typewriters, has a collection, knows this. Your best machine still has a little issue, and you know it does, and you can live with it. And that's my whole message. That you can live with these nagging little problems. And that's what we do with manual typewriters, right? You have to appreciate the mechanical nature of the machine itself in order to enjoy writing with manual typewriters. And this is what I have to try to convince people of, especially newcomers. And just today, I answered an email from somebody in Europe asking about typewriters. I think they were from Sweden. They showed me 4 typewriters on a Swedish eBay site and asked me to recommend a machine, and I recommended a Brother for a manual typewriter and also the possibility of this Nakajima daisy wheel electronic typewriter, one of those two. And basically the advice I told this person was that if you're really into the mechanical nature of typewriters, you want that mechanical writing experience, and if you want portability in a mechanical writing experience, then perhaps a manual typewriter is for you. But the price you have to pay for that, what you have to realize is it's not going to be a perfect writing experience. And by perfect, I mean it's not going to be the kind of writing experience that you're used to having with a word processor, because there are mechanical issues with manual typewriters. There always have been, which is why there were a plethora of repair shops back in the day, and also why even today, after the demise of the manual typewriter, we still see typewriter repair shops in business. And so my recommendation for people who want to explore the world of typewriters is manual typewriters are magical because they have this ability to be powered by our own fingers, and they are therefore direct connections to our own physiology. So it gives you what I call a cybernetic writing experience. Cybernetic in the sense of a union of mechanical and biological. And that's really what manual typewriters are all about. But because you have that connection between the mechanical and the biological, your sensitive biology is always going to be able to sense the imperfections in the mechanical nature of the machine. And that's just the way it is. And you have to be willing to live with that. So, several aspects here. First of all, the machines don't always perform perfectly. They will have nagging little mechanical issues. That's because they are mechanical. Friction, wear, hardened lubricants, dust, debris, all of that affects the operation of the machine. You can think of them as being like analog computers in a sense, that a mechanical part, a mechanical key, and a linkage is physically programmed or mechanically programmed to do a certain function, printing a letter, let's say. So it's all mechanical, and it wears. And manual typewriters are complicated, and so there's always going to be a little problem with them. Could be skipping the escapement, could be the line advance is wonky, the letters aren't straight, the ribbon doesn't feed properly. There's a whole plethora of problems you can have with manual typewriters, but the whole thing about them is that's what you have to accept up front to have that manual typewriter writing experience. That's what it's all about. That's part of the deal you accept up front when you want to write with manual typewriters. Electronic typewriters, and by that I mean daisy wheel typewriters, came out in the, let's say, late 70s or early 1980s at a time when manufacturers were cutting quality and cutting costs. And plastic engineering had not been perfected like it is today. So in theory, an electronic typewriter will have less mechanical problems. It'll just be more reliable because there's fewer parts, and all the different axes that work are all driven by stepper motors. But in practice, what happens is because of the early age of plastic engineering that a lot of these were built under, you might have problems with plastic parts broken, the keyboards age, and all this. So you have to accept the fact that you're getting a superior design in a sense, but it may not be constructed as well as a manual typewriter. Hey there, how you doing?
Have a great day.
Good. And so in theory, for being electric powered and not portable, electronic typewriters should be superior, but they're not always, right? But if your interest in writing is really about sitting down at a fixed location indoors where you have electricity, and you're really interested in a touch experience that's more like a computer, it's not physically powered by the strength of your fingers. If that's what you're looking for, then an electronic typewriter can fit the bill quite nicely. And so really there's no right answer to all this. It's really about what you want to do with your writing experience and what kind of work you want to do in terms of writing. And that really determines how you're going to approach this. Myself, I have both electronic and manual typewriters. Electronic, I have daisy wheel typewriters powered by AC, and I have the little thermal typewriters, which are also quite nice in their own way. The thermal typewriters give you a portable writing experience, every bit as portable as the lightest manual ultralight typewriter, but with the advantage of pristine, clean printing experience, with the caveat that you're generally going to be doing it on thermal paper these days. That is a kind of an interesting third option also. It's interesting, right, that we have those choices even nowadays. We can choose manual typewriters if we're willing to pay the price for keeping them maintained, right? And if we're willing to live with the fact that they'll always be less than perfect. And if that doesn't bother our writing, that's fine. And we still have new electronic daisy wheel typewriters being made by the likes of Nakajima. People are into typewriters for different reasons. A lot of the classic typewriter collectors were into it because they were mechanical and they're from a historic era, a bygone era perhaps. But a lot of newcomers to typewriters are interested in actually using them to write with. And I find that a very interesting and refreshing use case, right? They don't want typewriters just to keep under glass in cabinets, but to actually use them. And when it comes to the use case of typewriters, you can choose a wide variety of machines, not just manual, but electric manual machines, like Type Bar electrics, like your Smith Corona electrics, and the IBM Selectrics, which are electromechanical also, and of course thermal typewriters and daisy wheels. But I think it's important, if you're interested in writing, right? If you're using typewriters to write with, I think it's really important that we think about what is going to be our writing methodology. Do we like to write outdoors or in public somewhere? Do we like to travel with our typewriter? Does the physical space around us inspire us to write? Or are we closet writers? Do we hole ourselves up in our writing place, our home, office, or shed, or wherever we do it at, and therefore we have little need for portability? You know, back in the heyday of the typewriter, when you submitted a manuscript for publication, it had to be neat and legible and error-free, hopefully, which required typewriters and typists have a certain ability. The typewriters have to work flawlessly, and the typist has to know what he's doing. But in the case of nowadays, when the use of paper-based composing is generally done in the early stages of the writing process, that's not so important anymore. And that can free us up to use typewriters in a different way, and the kind of typewriter that maybe a writer in the mid-20th century wouldn't have used. He may not have used an ultra portable because they're kind of intrinsic compromises to the way they perform and their feature set. But nowadays, an ultra portable may be good enough for you if you're just trying to hammer out a rough draft. And you can do it in your favorite cafe or coffee shop or on top of a mountain somewhere. So we live in an interesting age. Creativity with paper, paper-based creativity. So I have this Remington 1040 typewriter on my bench right now that I had given maybe 6 years ago to my young grandson, and he hasn't really used it much, and it sat languishing in their garage, and it was in need of some service, definitely some service. And I have it about 90%, I think. There may be a few nagging, skipping issues with a couple of letters, but other than that, it seems to perform pretty darn good now. But, you know, it's not exactly really quiet, and being plastic bodied, it is kind of a little bit hollow and plasticky and resonant sounding, and I could probably work on that and get some adhesive felt put in there and helps deaden some of the sound, the rattliness of it. And the touch, it's not feather light. It reminds me of a lot of the Brother typewriters. Solid, crisp, but not really light. At the lightest setting, it's more like medium touch, maybe. Those are just the intrinsic limitations of manual typewriters, right? The physical design limits what it's capable of doing and how it feels and performs. So this is where I'm getting my thinking here. Is good enough good enough? Is a manual typewriter good enough for you? Or do you require something probably more reliable, certainly with an easier keyboard to operate, and with a better quality imprint? What's good enough for you? Keeping in mind that we're talking here about paper-based writing, mechanically printed paper-based writing, as opposed to handwritten paper-based, right? We're talking about composing and the early stages of editing on paper with machines, archiving our writings to paper directly instead of to some digital format. I think that's an important question to ask yourself. Is good enough good enough? Is the lightest, fewest feature set, compromised in design, and maybe having mechanical issues, is that kind of a typewriter adequate for your uses? Or do you require something like an electronic typewriter that is going to probably perform more reliably in the short term, with the caveat that, of course, it needs a power cord plugged into a source of electricity. So that's my question for you. Leave your comments down below. Is good enough good enough? This is Joe Van Cleve, and I wish you well, and I hope that you continue on your journey of pursuing creativity through writing. Until next time, have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye.